All right, so welcome to today's Coffee Break with Jaz Idakaar. I am broadcasting from the NYLA office. They've locked me in with all the tote bags. Yay, tote bags. I think that they're silly to trust me with this many tote bags. I might just take a box and run. But regardless of that, here's Jaz, and I'm going to hand it over. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, I'm Jaz and I'm a librarian with the OG BPL, aka Boston Public Library. I am going to be the new Programs and Outreach librarian up at East Boston for right now. I am totally keeping it real at the Mattapan branch as a generalist. And today I really want to talk about how we can improve our collections on homelessness and housing insecurity. Because if you are an urban librarian, chances are you interact with a lot of different homeless patrons or patrons struggling with hunger. And if you're not an urban librarian, but you are a public librarian, chances are that you've encountered people who are homeless or have given you the impression that they may have homeless issues around homelessness or maybe mental illness going alongside that. And it's a hugely important topic these days, and I'm hoping to give us all a great foundation of some background, some statistics, to give you some important keywords and subject headings to take into consideration. I'm also going to have a list of current and forthcoming titles for 2016, as well as a couple of other fairly recent titles that I think are a great addition to a lot of collections. I'll have an additional PDF so that people can just grab ISBNs from that if they are looking to quickly and easily find things. I also am going to have a nice big list of resources for further interest and study at the end as well, because I think it's a really important topic and there's so many different facets to this, whether you are trying to figure out how to inform yourself about the reality of homelessness and other things. So let's get started. Our collections should really be representative of the patrons we serve, and they should also expose librarians and patrons alike to new ideas. While homelessness is not a new idea per se, it's definitely a topic that's hugely of interest these days for a lot in the library world. Many library systems around the country are starting to have social workers and other forms of outreach and in-library services for their homeless and housing insecure communities. So we need to get informed and boldly go and make sure that we're doing what we need to for our patrons. So why is this important? We miss out on a lot of stories when we don't see a variety of different people in the media we consume, whether that's books, movies, TV, etc. Those stories help shape how we see and interact with the world. So what we see, what we consume, helps shape how we see the rest of the world. And adding titles on homelessness and housing insecurity can really be a helpful way to bring those stories into more popular consumption for our patrons, but to also get us thinking about these topics as well. There have been a number of different studies talking about how representation in media is very critical for the development of young people and how they see themselves in the rest of the world. And there's a study called Racial and Gender Differences in the Relationship Between Children's Television Use and Self-Esteem. And young white boys were always tending to receive a boost in self-esteem because they saw themselves portrayed positively, frequently, and in a variety of different roles in TV shows. And young children of color and girls were definitely less likely to feel that boost in self-esteem because they weren't represented. So representation is really, really important, and we want to build that into our collections, and we want to build that into our staff mindset and development as well. So a couple of statistics. Homelessness in the United States overall is actually down technically. And when I say technically, I mean the number of people who are physically counted as homeless during point-in-time counts is down over the last couple of years. Right now they count about 500,000 people as homeless, which includes sheltered and unsheltered people. So people living in homeless shelters and people living outdoors in tents, under bridges, etc. More than 30% of homeless people are families with young children. This doesn't include doubled up families, and this actually isn't the full story. So there are more than 7 million doubled up families that were counted in 2014. So we look at 500,000 technically fully homeless or living in a shelter homeless individuals, but then we have 7 million plus doubled up families. So that means, you know, the family might be living with relatives, they might be living with a friend, they might be couch surfing, they might be hopping from place to place. And statistics are kind of all over the place. It depends on who's counting and what they're counting. Some counts put homeless youth at about 1.6 million, which if we just jump back to that last slide, the Department of Housing counts 500,000 people, but yet we have this other count of 1.6 million homeless youth. 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ. Even though LGBTQ youth only make up about 10% of the youth population. So definitely a lot of overrepresentation there. Black veterans represent nearly 40% of all homeless veterans. So that is another staggeringly huge number. Though the number of homeless veterans has been declining in recent years, which is great, it's definitely still an issue, and it's definitely an issue that is intersectional with race as well. Some really great reports on homelessness and homelessness veterans will be later on in the slides. So this is just a little map of homelessness in the United States. The states in that sort of reddish color are states that have the highest number of homeless individuals that have been counted. So California, Washington, Texas, Florida, New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania all have very high numbers. There are a number of other states as well. Oregon, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, New Jersey, and Georgia, they all have pretty high numbers of homeless people as well. However, it is not quite as high as the states in red. And then DC, Nevada, Hawaii, and Alaska don't have that many homeless individuals in numbers, but they do have very high per capita rates of homelessness. So even though there aren't a lot of people who are homeless, out of all the population in the state, those numbers are very high. DC, the numbers per capita are staggeringly high and on the rise. And, you know, that definitely impacts, I think, a lot of the ways where we are trying to figure out how to provide service and where we might need to think about providing service to homeless and unhoused individuals. So with all of that background to sort of get you started on why this is important and what some of the numbers are, I want to talk about how important it is to build up your collection and different topics that we can talk about, different keywords, and sort of launching into the meat of things. So not only is nonfiction important, but fiction is as well. There are a lot of books out there where you have the, very tired stereotype of the crazy hobo who's like the secret murderer in the town. And, while those books are entertaining reading, they're not necessarily a very positive representation of homeless people. So it's really good to do a little bit of digging when you're trying to develop your collection, and try and see if you can find stories that maybe tell a more nuanced story of what it is like to be homeless, or housing insecure, to deal with mental illness, things around that sphere of topics. That don't play to the worst ideas and the scariest notions of what that might be like. Some really important related topics that often go hand in hand with homelessness and housing insecurity are mental illness, racism, substance abuse, incarceration, and trauma. So when you are looking for titles, both fiction and nonfiction, it's good to pull from those other topics as well, because a lot of times those stories will go hand in hand. And don't forget the kids and teens. So it's all well and good to build up collections for adults and for librarians. That is definitely critical. But there are a lot of stories for kids and teens out there that are really important, that give a view of homelessness that is not stereotypical, that gives a view to what life is like for other kids who, are maybe experiencing hardship, or, also they just help kids who may be dealing with those topics themselves to really kind of process it. Youth are really hit hardest by homelessness, and the number of homeless youth, depending on what statistics you look at, are pretty high. So don't forget them, because they are a real important part of that collection development. So this is a nice big list of keywords and subject headings. I have found with Baker and Taylor that mostly looking for homelessness gets me the most results as far as purchasing books and finding books that are relevant. A lot of these keywords are really good for doing searches on the web, for doing searches on book selling websites that allow you to do more natural language searches. So like if you're searching for books on Amazon, for example, if you look for chronic homelessness, you're more likely to turn things up than if you look on Baker and Taylor and put in the term chronic homelessness. With Baker and Taylor, it's usually easier to do something that's just one word and then narrow it down according to what your purchase parameters are. The ones with the asterisk are Library of Congress or MESH subject headings. So, homeless persons, homelessness, homeless youth, homeless women, homeless men, housing and welfare, street youth, public housing, those are all subject headings that are in catalogs. Also, homeless persons and libraries. Hey, we've got our own subject heading. That's great. There are also terms that are better to use. So when you're talking about developing your collections, when you're talking about how to improve services to homeless and unhoused individuals, there are some things that are better to say versus some things that are maybe considered, less positive. So like transient or the homeless, they're generally considered to be terms that you want to avoid. It's better to use phrases like homeless person or people experiencing homelessness, which really are people first phrasing and tend to just be a little bit more positive for people to hear and to use. So a couple of these you're going to find are very good for writing things up, for doing web searches. Again, Baker and Taylor, if that is what you use to buy your books, is a little bit, it struggles a little bit with some of these terms. And I found that basically focusing on homeless or homelessness will find me my best results, and then I can narrow down. Okay, so I wanted to launch into some suggested titles. Most of these titles are going to be published in 2015, 2016. There are a couple of older titles that are still relevant, and there are also a couple of 2017 titles. So things that aren't out yet, but things that will be out soon. So a couple of adult fiction titles that don't just say, oh, here's homeless people, look at them, aren't they sad or aren't they crazy? These really tell more nuanced stories. I am particularly interested in the sadness, and I've picked that up recently. It's not the primary main focus of the story isn't on one homeless person, but they play an integral role to the story. Then a couple of really cool biographies. I Am Charlie Wilson, written by Charlie Wilson, is a really great biography. Not a quick read, but definitely valuable. You may recognize his name. He's a pretty famous person, and he went through a lot of fame and fortune, and then went all the way down into homelessness, and then was able to climb back out. Another very interesting title is Catching Homelessness, a nurse's story of falling through the safety net. And if you are in a community that has a lot of professional development and nurse practitioners or nursing assistants, I think this could be a great title to add into the collection to not only show how just sort of an average person can experience homelessness, but also to add to a nurse's repertoire of understanding community, understanding homelessness, which can be very useful in areas with large urban populations where homelessness is high. Now, these are a nice big list of nonfiction titles. Some of these are going to be more useful to certain areas than others. All of these titles are going to have a pretty big focus on the US. I do have a couple additional titles that talk about homelessness in Berlin as well, and other cities abroad, but mostly it's a focus on US homelessness. I really like adding insult to injury, mistreating homeless women in our mental health system, because it takes a really intersectional view, not just of homelessness, but mental health as well, which can be very present in people who are struggling with homelessness. And then I have a short list of titles for young folks. I couldn't find a ton of recent nonfiction that seemed to be for young people that was accessible. I may have missed things, and I am always open to hearing from youth and children's librarians who are maybe a little bit more in the loop with that than I am. I do want to make a special mention of I Am a Bear. That came out in the last few years. It is a very sweet little story about a bear. It's a picture book, and he is unloved and needs a home, and it's a very sweet story. He does get his home, and it's very happy, but definitely you will tear up when you read through it. Definitely recommend that for children's collections if you are looking to buy things as well. The Christmas Eve Tree is another picture book. And then there are a couple of chapter books here, and then some young adult titles as well, past middle grade. And then the two nonfiction titles, from what I understand, they are a little bit more influenced by true facts, but they may have a little bit layer of storytelling on top of them as well. Once the slides are up and available, you'll be able to click on where it says additional titles, and you can just pull from that list. You can see the titles that are there. You can pull ISBNs, do what you will with it. I'm happy to share those titles. And if you guys have titles that you'd like to recommend that maybe you don't see on my list, you think that are essential to add to collections on the topic of homelessness, mental illness, housing insecurity, hunger, etc., please feel free to send them my way. I'm always happy to add to my list of resources. So we have tons and tons of information in here. A lot of it is pages and pages worth, but also very valuable. So the 2015 Annual Homeless Assessment Report to Congress is a place where I pulled a lot of statistics from. It breaks it down very granularly, very useful, a lot of pages. Definitely don't sit down to read all of these things in one go unless you have about a week to spare. But these are a great place to get started. The ALA has a lot of resources on homelessness, a great list to get you started. Unaccompanied youth and young homeless people are another issue that is very important. And Alone Without a Home is going to go state by state and break it down a little bit. Along with a couple of colleagues at the BPL, we've put together a LibGuide called Housing, Health, Hunger, and Help. Say that 5 times fast, I dare you. And this LibGuide puts together local resources for our patrons and for staff to refer patrons to, whether it's shelters, whether it's medical care, whether it's food pantries and free meals, whether it is legal help for those who are homeless or maybe facing eviction, housing resources, and then also a list of books, movies, and other relevant materials that can help people either research about homelessness and get a greater understanding of it, or just get a chance to read something that they can identify with in the collection, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. EndHomelessness.org is a great website to pull information from. You can see some statistics on veteran homelessness, but there are a lot of other great websites out there that do have information about homeless veterans. So one of the things that I do want to mention is that statistics are kind of all over the place. A lot of websites will have statistics from do not necessarily indicate that. And again, depending on who they're counting, who is counting the people, and where they're counting and what time, it can have a really big difference on the numbers. And again, once you count homeless, unhoused versus doubled up and other forms of unstable housing that are now being considered as part of issues around homelessness, the numbers really spike. There is a great study on homeless LGBT youth. Some very interesting pieces of information out there. And again, once the slides are up, you'll be able to easily click on these and do some more research. If you're looking for more videos on homelessness, there are a number of webinars out there that have been recorded and are up and freely accessible, and can really give some good insight into youth homelessness, queer youth homelessness, and other important facets. The PLA did a great webinar called Understanding and Serving People Experiencing Homelessness, a Trauma-Informed Approach. And that really takes a look at the reasons and behaviors around individuals who may be homeless and how to process that and how staff can address those things internally and address those things with their patrons as well, to make sure that it's not just, well, this person is sleeping, or this person has issues around body odor or hygiene, and that means that they have to go. The trauma-informed approach really I think takes a very nuanced look at things and gives staff and librarians a really good way to figure out how to serve patrons and how to ensure that service is reaching them. Okay, so a few final thoughts. I really think that when we develop and improve our collections with these topics in mind, we really serve our patrons to the fullest. Whether patrons are outsiders who want to understand more about homelessness, or they're experiencing homelessness themselves, showing people in their collection, showing that we as librarians are developing our collections to speak to our patrons and bring more information about a subject they might not know that much about, or saying directly, is really important. And we can represent the diversity of our communities better when we include homelessness as a topic, as a not exactly a genre, but as a topic of focus in our collections. You know, and aside from making sure that our patrons are well represented, we can empower our staff through training. We can try and add services that our most vulnerable patrons need. It's resume help, whether it's assistance with forms, you know, no matter what it is, there are definitely things that we can look at and see whether or not they're appropriate for giving to the people that need them the most. And again, it's about fully serving everyone who comes in. So whether they are somebody walking in with a fancy handbag and they need to do some research on, you know, a philosophical topic, or whether it's somebody coming in and saying, hey, you know, I'm about to lose my housing, where do I go? We want to cover the full spectrum of our patrons. So I'm hoping that everyone can take the time to look at what their collections are now, to see how they can improve and expand them on the topic of homelessness and housing insecurity, and really get to the heart of an important topic. And I think that's it. If you have any questions for me, if you have any comments, if you have any book suggestions, or other resources for self-study and learning about this really critical topic, feel free to email me at jidakaar@vpl.org. Thank you so much, guys, and I look forward to doing some more exploring and learning about this critical topic, and I hope you guys will too. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for watching, and if you want to, you can subscribe below, or you will be able to once the button's there, and we will see you for the next one. Thanks.